Welcome to Whistleblowers in partnership with Wix Trade Pro. Coming up.
Thomas went on TalkSport and he used that killer word, repulsive.
I don't like his behaviour. I see him abusing referees, and the abuse that he gives people isn't what we want to see.
The players complain, right? And it's their fault. If you don't want to be still on the pitch after 115 minutes, stop rolling around every time you fall over. Stop taking half an hour to get off the pitch when you're being substituted. Stop throwing yourself down when you're a goalkeeper.
And I mean, so involved with the game, I forgot to look at my clock. And I've got the fourth official shouting at us, Mark, the game's over, the game's over. And I was so enjoying it, you know, and nothing happened. Thank God nothing happened, but I was so enjoying the game.
Welcome to Whistleblowers Podcast, a challenging affair this week. We are like three Scottish football clubs doing real damage to ourselves financially. We've got Mark Clattenburg, the one and only Ian Ladyman, and Gordon Smart, one in Ibiza, one in New York, and one in London. But I don't know where it's more expensive for a coffee, High Street Kensington, New York, or Ibiza. I suspect Mark Clattenburg might be feeling a little bit like Celtic this morning, worrying about where he's going to find the money for the next season. How long have you been away, Mark?
It's now 6 days, and I thought I was coming back tonight, but I've just realised when I went to check in last night, I've actually got another day. And I'm thinking, how can I afford another day in New York? $30 for 3 Americanos. It's getting worse.
Why did you want 3 Americanos?
Right, I've got a family, you know. I've got to look after the family.
Well, listen, I don't sympathise. I do empathise. I am in London today, but I'm also on a little 2-day break in London with my family, and having been absolutely rinsed in the Lego store, the M&M store, and Hamleys yesterday, my pockets are feeling a little bit empty too, guys, I got to say.
Even better.
There's the Instagram poll for the podcast this week. Who's the most skint after having a week off?
But the thing is, right, so you bring your family down, I do sound like a northerner out of my comfort zone. That's because I am. You bring your family down to London for 2 days and you think, oh, right, so we'll do Big Ben, we'll do the House of Parliament, we'll do Downing Street, we'll do Trafalgar Square. And you do all of that. But while you're doing it, you're accompanied by a 6-year-old who keeps saying to me, when do we get to the toy shop, Daddy? When do we get to the toy shop? So eventually it just becomes a huge exercise in trying to hold back consumerism, as my life is generally. I might as well have stayed in Manchester. They've got toy shops there.
So, Ian, what did you buy yourself in the Lego store then?
A new pair of shoes.
Do they do holes in them in the Lego store?
The Lego store is a place of wonder, by the way. The Lego store is a place. I mean, you know what? We didn't spend anything in there, actually. It was Hamleys that did us. Hamleys absolutely did us.
Back in the day, the newspapers used to have people who would phone us with stories, but the big story from New York is the deal that Mark Clattenburg got on shorts when he was out there.
Hey, incredible list. Golf shorts, Under Armour, $29.99. Just under $30 for a pair of Under Armour shorts. Guess what I did? I bought them in every colour.
So there's the lesson. Go to New York. Don't buy coffee. Buy golf shorts.
Yeah.
What we've learned is that a pair of shorts cost the same as 3 coffees. There you are. There's our New York summary. Right, boys. I wanted to start by telling you about. I'm in Ibiza, right? So, who would you expect to see? I'm going to give you some clues. Watching Calvin Harris, a famous Scottish DJ, at Ushuaia, in front of God knows how many thousand people, enjoying the heat and the temperature of a balmy night. I'm going to say one of the most capped Scotland players ever, a formidable centre half. Who am I describing in the front row, getting right in amongst it?
I'm going to go Richard Gough.
Okay. Mark Clattenburg, would you like to
Colin
try
Hendy
again? Right, I'll give you a second guess, boys. Neither of you are right.
Well, it's not going to be Alan Hansen. I can't see it being Willie Miller.
But you're close.
Oof.
Oh, come on, Ian. Come on, Mark, help me out. I can't have a podcast with me saying.
I'm not really interested in Scottish centre halves, to be fair. But we'll have that debate in a minute. You've
refed him as a manager, yeah. You've probably had harsh words with them. He is
Alex McLeish.
Correct. There you go, Mr. Clattenburg.
Yeah, you see, bought it out of the bag.
Enjoying it. So my question to you both to start the podcast is, what's the most unusual situation you've spotted a football manager away from his day job?
That's a very good
question.
Ian's
bound to say a garden centre, isn't he?
That's a really. I once bumped into Sam Allardyce on a waiting to get on a plane. It was which is not an unusual place for football managers. But he was out of work at the time. I was flying to America to go on holiday, and we were flying from Manchester to Heathrow to get the connection to LA. And I noticed that Big Sam was in the queue. I went down and said hello to him. He's out of work at the time. I think it was just post England, and it was September time. And I said to him, I said, "Big man, how are you?" He said, "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "Well, you don't seem so." He said, "I'm just hanging around waiting for some fucker to get sacked."
It's a good impression. Very good impression.
And before long, somebody did. And
it's much the same with my career in the media sounds a bit like that as well. Boys, just and again, I'm not going to keep hanging around Scottish stuff too much, but Celtic getting kicked out of Europe, Ian, I mean, again, financially disastrous, but it does play a big part, I think, in the English managerial merry-go-round, because I can't see Brendan Rodgers sticking around much longer. It sounds like there's a bit of disquiet with the board. The fans are shouting to sack the board. He doesn't appear to have the money that he wants to stay in the Champions League. So what do you reckon, Ian? How long before Mark Clattenburg will be working with them at Nottingham Forest?
Look, I've said before, many times, I've written it, I've said it on the previous podcast I used to do with Chris Sutton, and Chris hated this thought of mine. Brendan shouldn't have gone back to Celtic. There was no point in going back to Celtic. He'd won everything at Celtic. There was nothing left for him to prove. European success at Celtic is always going to be a little bit of a pipe dream in terms of real European success, because they just can't compete at that level. They're not good enough. So I don't know why he went back there. Okay. In terms of your question, he's got a year left on his contract. Doesn't sound like there will be a new one. So even if he sees out the season, I imagine he probably would, sees out the season, wins the Scottish Premiership again, he's then a free agent. Where does he go? Do you? I'll throw it back to you two. Do you think he's proved? Do you think his stock is any higher now than it was when he left Leicester as a bloke who'd won the FA Cup and almost taken them into the Champions League on a couple of successive seasons, by going back to Celtic, ticking the same boxes that he'd already ticked last time? What's he done to his own reputation? Anything at all, or is it just the same as it was when he left England?
I mean, my answer to that would be, like, it's also going to be is Ange Postecoglou going to go back? And the principle being, I don't think you can go back. I don't think you should ever go back after that. And like you say, how are you going to enhance what you've done the first time round? And he left in kind of funny circumstances anyway. But yeah, I think this is the start of the end, beginning of the end.
I don't blame Brendan at all. Listen, he had a bit of a disastrous spell back in England. He's gone back to Celtic where there was some bit of unfinished business. There was a lot of, complaints that he'd left in the first place. I get half the battle. I just don't believe, Brendan had a great season last year. You just said he went toe to toe to Bayern Munich within minutes of knocking potentially Bayern Munich, one of the biggest sides in Europe, out of the competition. And in the end, okay, they fell short, but they just haven't built. That's not Brendan's fault. The talk about, the big talk about Jamie Vardy going into Celtic, still haven't done it. There's a striker who could have, probably put them through to the group stages. They've took a gamble, the board, not Brendan's. It's not always Brendan's fault. Brendan's got a group of players that he's got to manage. And, is this Scottish football now finding an issue because Rangers are finding the same issues as well, financially, as well as getting players up across the border again? So, is it Brendan? Brendan must be getting frustrated again that he can't get that player in or the players in to enhance his squad. And that's where the frustration lies. Brendan, if I was Brendan Rodgers and the board isn't back at us, I would be upset,
It's the constant complaint for Celtic fans that they just don't. Where does the money go? That's the thing I don't understand. They're a very well run club, and the revenue generated last season is massive. So where is that money? And I think the fans have got every right. The way they follow that club and support them is outstanding. And I think, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I think there's trouble ahead. Talking about trouble ahead, right? Ian, I want to talk to you about what happens behind the scenes with Thomas Tuchel, because international breaks coming. Again, we've done enough Scotland so far, but Tuchel's got a bit of work to be done, hasn't he? Because I think the last comments we heard from him really were the ones about Jude Bellingham, weren't they? Where he said he could be a bit repulsive. Now, after a remark like that, how do you pick up from that, particularly when you know what's going on with the Bellingham clan behind the scenes with the other brother as well, Joel? It sounds like he's got a bit of man management to do in this squad.
people like me who are starting to kind of pack up our pencils and notebooks for the summer, Thomas went on TalkSport and gave an interview in which he talked about Bellingham, and he used that killer word, repulsive. He was actually talking about the way that he thinks someone like his own mum might view Bellingham. You've got a little bit of context in that Tuchel did say, "Oh, he's great. You know, he's a great player. He's got to play with an edge. You know, I love him, but," and that was the but. He then said some of his behaviour can be viewed in a certain way, and that word, as we all know, it's resonated to such a degree that he's going to have to defend that or explain that on Friday. People like me will be asking him, "Why did you say it? Do you still think it? Have you spoken to Jude? Have you said sorry? How are you at risk of alienating your best player?" All of that is going to come crashing down onto Thomas Tuchel's head on Friday at Wembley.
I mean, he's a divisive character, right? When you look back through the history, when he was at Dortmund, the breakdown in relations there was brutal. I think it was described as a toxic mix of mistrust and communication failure, and that's led to a point of no return. Tuchel has burnt too many bridges at the club where leadership, players and employees have turned against them. PSG, it happened as well. I think it was Leonardo said, "I didn't like Tuchel's statements, neither did the club." So with that in mind, Mark, who wins should it get ugly? You know, is Tuchel's force of personality going to be big enough, or do you think player power is too strong now for somebody like that?
It's a fine balance because the Football Association are going to invest a lot of money in Thomas Tuchel's contract, and we all see that this is it seems to be a short-term contract, a short-term solution for one tournament. You know, Bellingham is the idol of English fans. He's the future of English football. And, Bellingham will be, the one star that everybody's looking up to. So player power, I believe, will always be over Thomas Tuchel. And, Thomas Tuchel will go to the next tournament, and this is such a big tournament coming up for England because, this is the World Cup. And then we've got this Euro Championships. At some point, England, with this group of players, have to win this tournament at some point.
Do you want a manager that puts a bit of fire in the belly as an England fan, though, Mark?
Yeah, of course you do. But the thing is now, as you see in club football, if you upset players down tools. And, these managers and coaches, whatever you want to call them, seem to have this fine balance of being able to try to manage. But it's interesting that he called out Bellingham. There's something underlying, and I'm sure Ian knows more. There must be something underlying in is it his family? What's creating this issue that Thomas Tuchel's come out and listen, I've watched Bellingham a few times playing for Real Madrid, and I've watched his behaviour when he was at Dortmund. I don't like his behaviour. I don't like his behaviour towards referees. I see him abusing referees. I see him chasing referees down tunnels. This is not what you want to see top England international. And what I used to see when I was a referee in England, like when you refereed international matches, the behaviour of players was so exemplary. It was not like club football. Club football was different. But when the players put on that national shirt, the respect towards match officials, the respect towards the game was completely different. And I believe Bellingham doesn't accept that. Bellingham's still in his club football world. And the abuse that he gives people isn't what we want to see as England players. England players normally show respect and the level of what is expected to wear that England shirt.
Yeah. Do you know when England played? Go on, Ian.
No, I was going to say we've got two sides of the Bellingham debate, really. On the one hand, you've got this fantastically talented footballer who, if things go well, could lead England over into a 10-year period of success. Okay, that's what could happen. On the other side, you've got a guy who suffers from a lack of discipline on the field. And when I say discipline, I mean two types of discipline: positional discipline, and that he doesn't play within the parameters of his position. Okay, whether he starts at a 10 or an 8, wherever he starts, he'll play that position for the first 5 minutes, and then get a bit Roy the Rovers, best kid in the playground, and just go where the ball goes. And we all know that in this day and age of kind of tactical structures, etc., You just can't do that. Maybe you can do it when you're playing Andorra at home. You can't do it when you're playing Serbia away from home. That is the first thing. I know for a fact that Thomas Tuchel has reservations, understands that and sees that. It's not just a media thing. Thomas Tuchel sees that. The second part of the discipline is what Mark refers to, which is discipline towards officials, but also towards his own players. Jude has got to lead, whether he's captain or not, okay? He's got to lead, and he's got to lead by example. And chasing down referees and chasing down his own players, which we saw a little bit of at last summer, the Euros 2 summers ago. That can't happen in an England squad, okay? That's okay. Again, if you're on the school playground and you're just the best kid, that's okay. You get away with that. You can't do that as an England player. And that's the mix of Jude Bellingham that we look at the moment, and it's Thomas Tuchel's problem to solve.
One tiny little observation, from your own experiences, but when Jude Bellingham was with England playing at Hampden in Scotland, I think it was for one of the anniversaries of the team. Yeah. He was getting dog's abuse in the dugout, but his performance, I think, turned everybody around. I think everybody in that ground almost applauded him off, Scotland and England fans. And my son was giving him a bit of stick, actually, trying to wind him up because we were right next to the dugout. And in all fairness, he handled it brilliantly. He was kissing the badge to him and laughing and winking at him. And he handed him an England towel and said, "Do you want that?" But so I think there's a bit of personality there that I quite like as well. And I don't think it should always just be a hammering for him. But the thing that concerns me just as much, and I don't know if you agree with this, boys, but the Job Bellingham stuff in Dortmund's actually a bit of a story about the family, isn't it? Because I think when those stories start to bubble up, and Ian, I'm sure you've written hundreds of them yourself, it isn't a good look for the Bellingham family, is it? With the Borussia Dortmund family members have all been banned now from the dressing room because pretty much I think the parents had got involved and tried to get answers from the manager, as I gather, Ian. I mean, is that true, first of all? I mean, that's what I'd love to know.
Yeah, look, there are loads and loads of stories that swirl around about the Bellingham family. Some of the things that tend to happen around at football games when they are watching this, either of their two sons. Okay, so the thing that happened at the weekend, I've not heard that before. Barging into a dressing room having a go at a coach, but I've heard about stuff that's happened in the seats with other fans, with people from other clubs. Okay, so I've heard stuff around that. Okay, that I know happened. First-hand stuff. A lot of that is kept under wraps by the media because none of us want to be seen to be absolutely constantly hammering a guy who's accepted as England's best player, okay, and has the potential to be a real role model for people, okay? So we don't want to be seen. So a lot of the stuff has gone kind of unwritten, unreported, okay? But there is stuff in the background. I only really care about this, and I suggest that any England fan should only really care about this if it starts to bleed into the way that Jude, and to a lesser degree at the moment, his brother, play. That's all it really should. If it starts to bleed into the way that they behave and play, then there's a problem. And you could argue at the moment, with some of the things that you see from Jude in particular on the field, wearing an England shirt, there is a little bit of that. There seems to be a feeling that almost beyond criticism, nothing ever seems to be his fault. And there's another side to it. Some people with England tell me that at camp he's a really, really good lad, and he really, he wants to do the right things. He wants to set the right example. There are other people who are less sympathetic towards him. There are two sides of the argument, but at the moment, Jude needs to take the next step in his development. And the next step in his development needs to be from fabulous footballer with a bit of an attitude to a fabulous footballer with an attitude that works. Because at the moment, he's got an attitude that is threatening to hold him back rather than propel him forward. That's the only thing I really care about.
But the only thing is, Ian, is this the danger of parents being their agents? Because they have, there's the parent side of it. You care about your children, of course. But when they've got another interest, because I think it's absolutely, if this is true, what happened at Dortmund, where the father's storming the tunnel to speak to the coach after the game because the son got taken off at halftime, that's kid stuff. That's what happened to junior football. That's what my father did if I wasn't playing the week, on the Sunday. Come on. This is top. This is, the father has to accept if tactically the coach has made a decision based on what they believed. They might not agree with the coach, but I've never seen anything, if this is true, I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life that a father wants to storm and speak to a coach immediately after a game. And, we all care about the children, but you've got to take a step back.
I absolutely agree with you. There's a documentary that the Bellingham family actually kind of did themselves with a production company that during the Euros actually, and before the Euros, it started with Jude playing for Real as they won the Champions League against Dortmund at Wembley, which preceded Euro 2024. And it's quite a fascinating documentary. Obviously, it's very kind of, it's very polished and very one-sided. But what it does show you is that there is an incredible bond in that family, okay? That family are such a tight unit, okay? And there's a lot to be said for that. The Bellinghams have obviously put a lot into their son's development. They've obviously given them everything emotionally, financially that they can, okay? And you can see the tight-knit nature of that family. However, if that, and it is, there's a bit of us against the world about them. And that'll take you so far. But at some point, that has to be accompanied by some self-awareness. And at times, with Jude, that is what he sometimes appears to lack. And he's got to get to that stage at some point.
Mark, we'll move back to Thomas Tuchel in just a second, but I know you've mentioned Jordan Henderson in the past, and your relationship with his family is something that you could lean on to get him to behave on the pitch. But have you ever been in a situation where a family member's cornered you to have it out about something, a decision you'd made in relation to their kids?
No, it's completely different. I think once you got into professional football, I think, like, for example, we touched on previous podcasts about Jordan Henderson and how Jordan was really, clearly his relationship with his mother was quite powerful. And I think his mother had quite an influential, statement around his performance. So I lent on that when he decided to abuse me. And I said, I'll tell your mother what you've just said. And that diffused the situation. So his parents were completely different. I think, I knew them. They were very respectful for me. They knew how difficult a job a referee was. So therefore, the respect was completely different. I think different when it was, for example, a Sunday mornings. I think youth football is completely different. I think the parents abused referees, and I got abused even when I was a Premier League refereeing junior football. I was still getting abused. So that side of it is, I think when you're at professional football, I think there's a level where, yes, there is a bit of protection. And, we're talking about the Bellingham family, that yes, there's a protection, but there's a level that you can't really cross. And I think, going to coaches, abusing referees or whatever isn't really a great look. And, I think Jordan was a great example where I think Jordan has a bit different probably relationship with his family. And I think, yes, I get what Ian's saying about the Bellingham family protect him a lot, but it's not, nobody's really against. Everybody wants the Bellinghams to do well. What I loved in, for example, when Job was playing for Sunderland, who was in the stands every week? The whole family watching the sons play. They're such a close knit family, but the world's not against them. Everybody wants Jude Bellingham to be one of the stars for England and score in a World Cup final. That would be the greatest story ever. Nobody's really against them.
Right, Ian, go back to the headache that Tuchel might be facing away from the man management. It's about big selections, because there are a couple that he's got to make, hasn't he? So, when you get in front of him in a press conference, what's the big question about his team selection?
Yeah, look, what I can say a couple of days out as we sit here on a Wednesday morning is that I think it'll be desperate to get Jack Grealish into that squad. This may come back to haunt me. I'd be surprised if Jack isn't in the squad on Friday. Thomas spoke so warmly about Jack at the end of last season when he obviously wasn't in squads, explaining why he wasn't, because he wasn't playing, but saying how much he loves him, how much he values him, but he wants to see him playing. Given that this is a big double-header, don't get me wrong, they've got to get a result in Serbia, because if they do, then World Cup qualification is almost assured. If they don't, then there'll be some question marks. But having said that, there's probably some wiggle room. The first game is against Andorra, which is like a kick-in. So I'd be amazed if Jack isn't in. I think that Livramento will be in from Newcastle as well. Thomas is a fan of his. He was in the European under-21 squad in the summer, of course. I think he would be in. Interesting also about Delap of Chelsea, whether he might get in again. He sent him with the 21s in the summer when some people expect him to be in the senior squad. But going back to Grealish, have we got an issue here with Grealish stroke Anthony Gordon? Anthony Gordon's been in squads, is becoming a bit of a regular squad member, but there's some checkered history there with Anthony as well. I didn't speak particularly glowingly of Gareth Southgate, having been overlooked for selection during much of the Euros. Has played a couple of times subsequently, not exactly pulled up trees, and now we've seen the other side of his game in the game against Liverpool on Monday when he's got himself sent off at a big moment and affected the outcome of the game. So Thomas Tuchel's got a little bit of that to weigh up as well.
Mark, Anthony Gordon.
Don't get me started. I think I get why he felt it was necessary to make the challenge. I get his side of the argument to say, look, I'm pumped up. I'm trying to get the crowd up. We're losing 1-0 just before half time, but he makes a tackle that is just not acceptable. And, I read things on Twitter, fans saying that tackle shouldn't be a yellow card. If you see that sock of Virgil van Dijk come down from the studs of Anthony Gordon, there's only one answer that's going to be, it's a red card. And the tackle was so dangerous. He's let his team down. What I get angry about Anthony Gordon is there's a potential there. When he came to Newcastle, he downed tools a bit like Isak didn't want to play for Everton anymore. He manufactured a move to Newcastle. He got his move to Newcastle. He was positive. He was always on the front foot, running past players. He was a fan's favourite. You're talking 2 seasons ago, I looked at his statistics, 11 goals, 10 assists. That's not a bad outcome for a left-sided winger. And I think the fans really liked him. We'll look back at last season when there was talk about him going to Liverpool. There was, it was one point where Newcastle were looking either a deal for the financial fair play to Gordon out, or it was Anderson and the boy to Brighton. That was the one that kept Gordon in the club. But I looked at Gordon's statistics last year, 6 goals and 5 assists from roughly the same amount of games. So it isn't, as a fan, it isn't good enough. And then I think what really upset the Newcastle faithful was the day when he played against Brighton and he got that needless red card. He knows, and he knew, players know that if you're going into a major final, sure that you're going to play in a major final, that A, you're not wanting to get injured, of course, and B, you never want to get sent off. And as a player, what he did that day was like, I'm going to get sent off. It looked manufactured. I'm not saying it was manufactured, but as a fan, I can get his argument about the red card against Liverpool. He's flown into a challenge. He's trying to help the team. I get that argument. But that against Brighton wasn't helping the team. And he got a 3-match suspension, which meant he missed the final. And I think fans got upset with him because he's missing key games. Again, when we haven't got a striker, he's missing 3 games, the next 3 games, which is, for Newcastle at the moment, is such a huge loss. And if Anthony Gordon wants to make the England squad on a regular basis, he's got to make sure that his temperament's right, his attitude's right. You can't, for example, do that in an England game. You would be, you instantly dismiss you letting your team down. And at an international level, the fine margins can cost you result. I just think, going back, and I like what Ian said before, I think Jack Grealish at the moment, if we're going to go on form, and, Gordon's not going to be playing for the next 3 games, I think what Jack Grealish did in his first game for Everton at home, and the assist that he made and what he did, I think Jack Grealish would be a great addition for the England squad than Anthony Gordon at the moment.
I think there's
the boys. I was just going to say, Jack Grealish hasn't scored since April. Anthony Gordon hasn't scored since January. So these are
there's 2. Yeah, but there's Jack Grealish, 2 assists at the weekend, and that was the Jack Grealish of old. He went past players. We never saw that. Like Ian said this week in, week out about Jack Grealish, what Guardiola did. Bring the ball back, pass. Actually, Jack Grealish did what he did at Aston Villa. He got the ball, the fans were off the seats, and he went past the fullback and got the ball across, and they got 2 goals. And that's what people want to see Jack Grealish do for England.
I heard somebody say, I can't remember which pundit it was, but he said there was in that Everton game at the weekend, there was an Aston Villa assist, the first goal, and then there was a Man City assist, which was the second one when he got the ball and just checked back and just laid it off to a teammate who smashed it in from 25 yards. But I'll just say, I think there's psychology at play here, and this is one of the interesting intricacies of being a national team manager when you only get players every few weeks, every few months. Thomas Tuchel has got to seize the moment with Grealish He's after 2 years of going down psychologically and emotionally. He's now on the first up that he's been on for so long. And Tuchel has got to give Jack the opportunity to get on that wave and ride it. And the way that you get on that wave and ride it is to put him back in the England squad. Even if he only gets half an hour off the bench against Andorra, it's a firm message. You're back. Let's build on the momentum that you've got from an early good performance for Everton, and let's crack on. And just briefly what you said about Anthony Gordon, Mark, there's so much bullshit at play in modern football. I do think, I saw his Instagram post afterwards apologising, fair enough, saying he was trying to lift the crowd. That crowd didn't need lifting. Anyone who watched that game knew that crowd was absolutely at it. There was no need to do it. The fact is that as a player, you endear yourself to your supporters. Some things in football have changed over the years. Some things have stayed the same, and this has stayed the same. Endear yourself to your supporters by trying hard every week, putting yourself up there every week, and performing. Forget tackles, crunching tackles that are going to get you sent off. That endears you to nobody. Forget Instagram posts after the event. Get out there and play. Play to your level. And Craig Hope, our Newcastle man, who we know knows everything that goes on inside that football club, said to me, I asked him about Gordon a couple of months ago, and he said to me, yeah. He said, since a bit of transfer talk about other clubs, he said he's gone right off the boil.
Yeah, just a quick one on Jack Grealish. I think this is a turning point. On Friday, when they announce the squad, this could be a good turning point for Jack Grealish's career. Because I think if he's in this England squad, I believe Jack Grealish will have a good season. I think if he gets this, I think he'll feel loved again. And if Thomas Tuchel can put an arm around him like David Moyes will, I think this could be a big turning point in his career. And
he's great in the camp, Jack. He's great in the camp. Yeah. That is the thing about him. He's absolutely great in the camp. The other players absolutely love him.
I was going to say that. It's hard for me to say this as a Scotland fan, but I think England need a talisman like Grealish, like Gaza, Glenn Hoddle. You need a player like that, and he's got it. And I think it works at international level, having a bit of a maverick like him. And again, if I was taking my son to see the national team, you want Jack Grealish playing, don't you?
You want players that are going to beat players. I think we've gone, we've watched tournaments, we've watched England. England, for me, and I don't know how Ian finds it because he watches them on a week-to-week, but I'm watching them as a fan. I'm bored. I'm bored watching England, if I'm honest. And I want something to bring a fresh energy, to bring back people to watch, because watching England can just be,
it can be. And we've got that. We've got players on the up. So let's look at it psychologically. So Eze will be feeling top of the world at the moment. He's just got his big move to Arsenal. Okay, Madueke's the same. He's gone to Arsenal. Grealish will be feeling like he's on. And then you look on the other side of the coin, looking still at wide players. You got Anthony Gordon. What's he feeling? Phil Foden wasn't in the Man City team at the weekend. What will he be feeling? Marcus Rashford, I think, got some time off the bench. For Barca. Trent hasn't exactly started like a house on fire at Real Madrid. So there's players that are up and there are players that are down. But what I was impressed last season when Tuchel, as soon as Rashford did anything for Aston Villa, Tuchel had him in, get him back in the squad, as if to say, right, you're for me if you're playing. And I think he'll do the same with Jack.
Right, brilliant stuff, lads. We're going to move on because I want to come back in just a second to the boring football thing. But before we do, a reminder, you can get in touch, whistleblowers@dailymail.com if you want to email us, and the social accounts, in case you don't know them by now, on X, @BlowersPod, TikTok, @WhistleBlowersPodcast, and on Instagram, @WhistleBlowersPod. Now, Mark, you just mentioned it, right, that football can sometimes feel quite boring, but it's a massive issue, this, right? If you look at Newcastle against Liverpool on Monday, more than 100 minutes. And again, that helped Arne Slot's side, didn't it? But the ball was in play for less than 45 minutes of those 100 minutes. Now, that's the lowest proportion the Premier League has seen in 15 years, right? And all you hear about is how brilliant the Premier League is. And we also hear as well, don't we, Mark, about stronger measures against time wasting, short-lived periods where added time regularly ran at double digits. But I think fans are getting wound up by this now. I find myself getting wound up by it. So, Mark, what's going on here? Why do you think this is running away with itself with matches regularly being over 100 minutes?
Well, they had this problem so many years ago. When I first refereed in Champions League, for example, they used to get the same stats, 40-something minutes in a game, which was just not acceptable. They eventually got it up to 60-something minutes, which was a huge step forward by certain law changes. Of course, some law changes can work, some don't help the game move forward. I think referees can help themselves. I certainly think when a player's injured, just go straight for the stretcher or have some sort of mechanism where the player's removed from the field to play immediately unless there's a serious injury. Because I watch football and I remember watching, it was the semi-final, the quarter-final, Arsenal against Paris Saint-Germain. And I said, at that point, Arsenal in Paris were all over Paris. And what did the goalkeeper do from Paris? Go down injured after 10 minutes. Why? Because he wants to change the flow of the game. That 2-3 minutes of him getting the treatment for his injury, or so-called injury, changed the mechanics of the game. And then after that, Arsenal weren't the same team. And teams do it. Teams, it's in their tactics are doing it. So the only way, the problem you've got is goalkeepers you can't stop, because unfortunately the goalkeepers are the ones that are protected, that they don't go off for a period of time. Like in the Premier League, for example, they go off for 30 seconds if they go off without the yellow card for an opposition. So if a player gets injured, you take them straight off. That's one point. We'll look at the law change for the goalkeeper, the 8 seconds. Yeah, that isn't the issue. I always said, and I've said this how many times before, and I got criticised, it isn't the goalkeeper that's the issue. The problem you've got is throw-ins is a big issue, and it has been. And I've always said, and I'll say it again, the only way you'll combat the time wasting on throw-ins is if you say to the team, you have in your head, get the ball in. If they don't bring the ball in, you reverse the decision. I can guarantee if you've got the ball, you don't want to give that back to the opposition. So you'll throw it in. And people say to me, criticizing, where the referees have got too much power. It's not the power. It's about giving the referees in the laws of the game the power to improve the game by bringing the ball in quicker, because you're not going to use it every 2 minutes. It's a threat to say, get the ball in. And I've said it before with goal kicks and corners. If they're taking too long on goal kicks and corners, reverse the decision. And it will happen once in a blue moon, like the goal, 6 seconds on the goalkeeper, now the 8 seconds on the goalkeeper. But it will try to enhance the game, because I see corner kicks taking too long now.
How did you decide at a time refereeing? Was it a guess?
It's bizarre. Yeah. So what you did was, and it's not scientific, it was, for example, you had an injury, 30 seconds. You had a yellow card, 30 seconds. You had,
substitution.
maybe substitution, an injury. So what I used to then do, because coaches used to start complaining, was used to get the fourth official to jot it all down. But you used to use it as a guide. So if there was, say, 7 incidents, that would be 3.5 minutes. If the score was, say, 4-0, the teams wanted to be off the pitch anyway. So you're trying to balance what football expects. So football might expect, say, 3 minutes or 4 minutes. So you're trying to build that time around. Now, the way the game's changed so much, now we're talking about, should we have a timekeeper? Should there be some independent person, a bit like rugby, where you stop the game for a major injury, so the clock stops, and the stop clocks for major incidents of the game. But then people criticize it and say, well, that's not football. That's what American sports do. Are we going down the American sports route? Do we have this fine balance? If we can accept that the game needs to be played within 60 to 70 minutes, 60 minutes is probably the perfect scenario. If it can get to that, then we haven't got an issue. But at the moment, we've got an issue and we've got to find a solution. If the solution is we've got to stop the clock to get that, to give fans that they're not shortchanged, then that's the solution. But I would prefer that we tweak some of the rules within the laws within football to give the game a better chance, where teams aren't absorbing time and try to manufacture. Because at the end of the day, it's about winning, isn't it? And they'll do every way to win.
But it's another one of these issues in football where the horse is long bolted and is so far down the road now that small tweaks aren't going to get the horse back. You've got to be radical, okay? And I've never heard that one that you mentioned there, Mark, about if they take too long over a free kick, reverse the decision. Quite clever that. Hadn't thought of that one. But I've written before. I've written columns a couple of seasons ago about stop clocks, stopping the clock, whatever you want to call it. People listen to this podcast know that I'm a rugby league fan. They have a timekeeper in rugby league. They have a timekeeper in rugby union. It's not just American sports, and it works. Now look, football's 90 minutes. You can't move from that. It's a fundamental principle of the game. You can't move from 90 minutes. Okay, so I don't think you can stop the clock for everything in football, because you would just be literally there all night. But I think, given that IFAB, who make the rules, the laws of the game, are ever keen to trial things further down the pyramids, lower levels, give things a go, tweak things that don't need tweaking, I think we should give this a go. I think it should be given a go. And I think that, for example, the clock should be stopped for substitutions, which so often these days are just another tactical manoeuvre to waste time. Stop the clock for substitutions. Stop it for goal celebrations, which can go on for 2 minutes. Stop it for injuries. I'm not sure whether we stop it for goal kicks and throw-ins and corners. Not sure we need to go down that. But major stoppages in play, where the ball is physically not in play, goal celebrations, substitutions, major injuries. I think it'd be a huge start. Have a go at that. And the other thing, I've been laughed out of town about this before, and I know it'll never happen, and I know it's wild, but honestly, I would look at banning substitutions after about 85 minutes. In football, because so many substitutions after 85 minutes are done for one thing only. They're not done to change the way the game's going. They're done to slow the game down and to lead it to a conclusion. And it's wrong. And as soon as we gave the Premier League managers 5 subs, that just made that even worse. It'll never happen. People call me an idiot, but seriously, time-wasting substitutions made in the 89th minute and the 92nd minute and the 95th minute are just against the principles of what a game is about.
I like the idea of that, Ian, but there's part of me that thinks putting on those fresh legs for the last 5 minutes just to take advantage of a tired defender's a clever tactic.
But I don't think. But that's not why it's done. It's not why it's done, Gordon. It's done to waste time. So Mark knows that 30 seconds is added on for substitution. So a manager holding on to a lead knows if he makes a substitution and his player takes a minute to get off, he's 30 seconds in credit.
Yeah, here's a one for you. Here's a quick one then, because Pierluigi Collina, who's the head of refereeing in FIFA, made a statement, was it about a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago? And he said, why not make games of football 30 minutes and then you stop the clock?
Right. So that is what I mean when they say, I mean, that would work because you'd get 60 minutes of action. You'd guarantee yourself 60 minutes of action, okay? Which from where we are at the moment, which is normally somewhere between 45 and 52 minutes, would be a huge improvement. But I don't think fundamentally you can change the game from a 90-minute game to a 60-minute game. That just feels wrong to me. But there's got to be a halfway house with it.
Of course it isn't then. But what we've also got to look at, Ian, how many players were complaining after the World Cup?
Yeah,
not the Euro. It was the World Cup where FIFA said we're going to add on the time, and I was working on some of them games, and some of them games were going on 115 minutes.
Too much,
yeah. And the players were getting injured. The players were,
but Mark, the players complain, right? And the managers complain. It's rubbish. It's the players, and it's their fault. If you don't want to be still on the pitch after 115 minutes, stop rolling around. Stop rolling around. Stop rolling around every time you fall over. Stop taking half an hour to get off the pitch when you're being substituted. Stop throwing yourself down when you're a goalkeeper. It's the players who can fix this.
But then the referees, but the referees also have. We look back at the last few years, and referees used to say to players, "Get up, just ignore them." Yeah, and I used to. One of my man management styles was the first 5 minutes. If you knew a player was going to do it, you just say, and if he wasn't injured and you knew, you just said, just leave him out there. And eventually, after maybe 30 seconds, he would get up because he knew he wasn't getting the free kick, and that sent a message to all the players. If a referee's weak and he gives a free kick, a soft free kick to the teams, what do the players think straight away? The referee's going to keep doing it. So they just keep doing it and doing it and doing it.
Mark, one last question before we close this off. Was there an incident where you added extra time that changed the result? I mean, we've talked about the Manchester derby.
Yeah, but I could justify the added on time. It was just Sir Alex that day against Manchester City decided that he didn't want his usual added on time, and he didn't use his watch, the point of his watch, and say that, you know, we've got to play as much time as we can, you know, for Manchester United to have a chance to score, for example. But for me, I was allowed to add the added on time, but at the time it was it 3-1 to Man City, and it went on to finish 6-1.
But did you ever do it accidentally? Do you know where you've made that calculation of 7 30-second incidents, and something has happened? Can you think of anything?
No, I can remember. I can't remember the game, but I remember I was so involved in the game. And I mean, so involved in the game, I forgot to look at my clock. And I've got the fourth official shouting at us, Mark, the game's over, the game's over. And I was so enjoying it, you know, and nothing happened. Thank God nothing happened, but I was so enjoying the game. Not always that was the case, because sometimes after 90 minutes at Stoke, for example, when it was freezing cold, I'm looking at my watch thinking, when can I get off?
But
did you look at the sideline and somebody's mum was shouting, right, boys, for tea?
Did you not figure that something was amiss when they started turning the floodlights off?
Of course,
Gordon, I want to ask you one quick question, Gordon, very quickly. So if you're Easter Road watching Hibs, right, with your lad and your mates, as a punter, would it offend you if you looked up at the screen and realised that the game has been managed by an independent timekeeper and a stop clock? Would that offend you?
No, I would appreciate it. No, particularly, when my son was younger, it was hard to keep him interested some days. It was a really dull game, especially if you're playing one where managers are deliberately horsing the ball out and, there's not foot. On a cold day, right, in January or February, when the weather's minging and you've got a 7 or 8 year old and the game's going on for 110 minutes, it's not a good spectacle, is it? So you've got to keep it moving. So I wouldn't be offended at all. But I think there is a radical change required there, because, even when I follow the scores of the weekend and you're like 109 minutes, you don't know when the game is going to end, do you? Especially if you're out and about and you can't be there. You're like, I can't. Even the Liverpool-Newcastle game, I wasn't around at the time, and I was like, it's going to be a 2-2 draw. And then about 3 hours later that day, I realised that Liverpool had won. So, I think you need a bit of uniformity, and I think it needs to be pulled back into line.
It is quite funny these days when you're doing that, when you're watching it on whatever, on your phone or whatever, on whatever website you use, and you're watching your team and you think, oh great, that's got to 90 minutes, we're going to win. But they think, hang on a minute, there could be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 minutes to go yet.
The worst thing is being in America, watching Newcastle against Liverpool when most of the fans in the American bars are Liverpool fans. And I'm the only person, I'm the only one in O'Hara's down by the old 911. Is, the famous bar. I'm the only Geordie in there. And one of the guy goes to us, he went, why are you in this bar? He said, you should go up to the 36th Street to the Newcastle Supporters Club. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to go all the way up there because I want a pint of Guinness and watch the football. Thanks,
I'm not going to go all the way up there to watch my team lose.
I'll give one quick story before we go. When I was editor of the Scottish Sun, Andy Gorham was a columnist for us, and talk about relying on a score from an app. Well, Andy filed a piece as a columnist saying something along the lines of, this is another nail in the coffin of the Rangers I once loved. To lose 2-0 to Motherwell in that fashion, it's just disgusting. You know what's coming here, Ian, don't you? A couple of bottles of red wine in, off to his kip, and the next morning couldn't understand why. I phoned him asking why he'd filed a report for a 2-0 that was actually a 3-2 to Rangers.
glory Rangers.
Exactly, yeah. I said that won't be happening again on my watch, Mr. Gorham.
Just change the intro from "This isn't the Rangers I love" to "This is the Rangers I love." Very simple tweak. Very simple tweak.
Oh, dear me. Okay, boys, been a pleasure speaking to you today. And that's it for this latest episode of Whistleblowers. We're back on Tuesday for the next instalment. But remember, follow us on socials. Whistleblowers@dailymail.com for emails as well. So please do get in touch. Right, Mark, I don't know if you've taken it to New York with you, but all that remains for you to do is blow the full-time whistle.
If you want to watch more episodes of Whistleblowers, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll keep you up to date all the way through the summer with everything that's happening in the world of football.